Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 4, the Mind Games podcast, where each episode we piece together the puzzle that is mental health with a bit of stuff in between. So this is real talk from two very real people. I am, of course, Thomas Welburn, chronic health warrior, multimedia extraordinaire. Joining me on this inner path of discovery is my co-presenter, the master of positivity, the Han Solo to my Chewbacca, Chris Allen, occupational health advisor, mental health first aid instructor, and all-round great guy. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm doing even better now that I think I can just live in faith now, Tom. You will never let me down with the intros. I'm consistently impressed now. Episode 4, but countless other recorded and unreleased. Never ever let me down with your comparisons. Thank you. That's really kind of you.
Is that a bit better than mac and cheese?
No, mac and cheese was good too. I mean, they go together. They go together like mac and cheese. That was great, right? It's no. It was as good as mac and cheese, if not better. Yeah.
Well, Han Solo's the smooth talker, you see. Chewbacca just kind of stands there. He's
and roars.
Yeah. I mean, you're the one who does jiu-jitsu, so maybe you're more Chewbacca because he's the enforcer.
He is a bit, isn't he? Yeah. I wouldn't typify or classify myself very much as an enforcer, really. There are enforcers. There are enforcers in every dojo, of course. I remember when I was first starting training, I was, a no-stripe white belt, and I fought a bodybuilder who was, way stronger than me, and I'm strong anyway, but way stronger than me. And when one of my training partners saw the bruises I had all over me, like fingerprint bruises from the amount of pressure that was put on me, he asked me who did it. And he was, smaller, but still strong, and just chumped this bodybuilder. Because what happens sometimes in jiu-jitsu gyms is you get people walking in from the weightlifting gym that's next to it and just want to try their luck, see what it's like. And, it's not like the old days back in Brazil when you would have gym challenges when people would walk in off the street, challenge the professor. They just walk in for a free class because you get your first class for free. And yeah, they get to do whatever they want to the students. And it's up to you whether you choose to engage with that. And of course, I always do, because it's a nice test, isn't it? Or what the regular man on the street versus you would come out like. But yeah, when I was fresh in my training career, I used to get battered by these like guys who are just big, massive, like balloon animal muscles, until I learned to deal with it. And it becomes a bit easier after that.
Wow, that sounds delightful.
It is great fun, yeah. Although my wife used to be like, "What has happened to you?" Like,
I'm gonna have to look into this myself. See if there's one where you can. I mean, I'm a pretty skinny, tall guy, so obviously, if I was gonna learn any sort of self-defense training, it'd have to be one where you leverage their body weight against them, rather than one where it's about just out and out strength of you as the person defending yourself. So. But I think there's ones out there that are more based on that.
Yeah, you should go to a Gracie dojo. I like Gracie because it is more self-defense based. They did a big promotion a couple of years ago where there was a video of a kid getting bullied, and he was like followed around the school by the bully, videoing him, and they beat him up and did stuff to him. And that video went viral, and everyone was aghast at how can something like this happen, and it happens all the time. So what these Renner Gracie, who's the great-grandson, I think, of the person who is credited from Brazil with developing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, reached out to them and said, take for free my anti-bullying course. And it was a big promotional thing. And it's actually, very admirable.
And I think that's a good segue into the podcast, because
it really is.
What did you end with then about someone getting bullied? Which is a nice little mental health success story. So we'll use that as a segue now that we've had our little introductory chat into the podcast. So obviously, anyone who's watched this, how it works. 3 topics. Anyone who's new to this, 3 topics. We've got discussion, we've got Q&A, we've got in clinic. So the topics that we're going to go over today in the discussion part, we're going to talk a little bit about Simone Biles, her kind of story during this Olympics, because it's been quite prominent. Won't go into it too much. Obviously, we'll save that for the discussion. We want to talk about some studies that have come out just basically about a lot of middle-aged people having several chronic health conditions, some of them related to mental health. And then we've got a nice question in the Q&A. And in the in-clinic, we're going to have quite an interesting discussion about basically what you can do if therapy doesn't work for you. Because just to play devil's advocate, therapy doesn't always work for everyone. Obviously, you want it to work for you, and Chris would want it to work for you. But there are going to be occasions for some people where it doesn't. So we're going to have a little deeper chat about what to do if therapy isn't for you. So with that in mind, let's go straight into the discussion and chat about those few things that I mentioned.
Discussion.
Okay, we're back with the discussion part of the podcast. And I think the article that we will lead with to start is, I think Simone Biles is a good one to start with, because obviously there's a lot that has happened with this one. She did end up withdrawing, just I think from the final, but then from 2 more events as well, if I'm right. But I'm sure Chris will go into this, but she's a massively decorated Olympian. I mean, she is referred to a lot as the best in her field. But I think one of the reasons that she kind of withdrew from this, it was twofold. It wasn't necessarily all because of her mental health. Some of it was to protect herself, because anyone who watched it will know that she kind of fumbled her initial run when she was taking part in the Olympics. She got I think one of the lowest scores that she's ever got, if not the lowest, and it kind of threw her mentally, and then she made the decision to pull out.
Yeah, she did. So the situation, as I sort of understand it, is it has been termed as a mental block. Now, it feels like it's the right decision from my point of view, that if you're putting your physical health at risk as a result of a mental block, and potentially your mental health at risk as well, through being really good at something and then failing at it on a world stage, then it feels like it's the right thing to pull back from. But what I find interesting is the turn of phrase, or the point of view that the body and the mind are out of sync, perhaps arising from this mistake that you referenced earlier on, Tom. But the idea that there's been an impact on the performance because the body and mind are out of sync. And I think that that's a really interesting place to look at from a mental health point of view, but also from a performance analysis or performance point of view. Because when we think about this from the point of view of the workplace, or how we operate, or if you want to get a lot done in your life and you want to be one of these people that chases peak performance at all times, like a Tim Ferriss type of person, inevitably there will be times when you're out of sync. Maybe your mental state wants to achieve this certain level, but your body just can't keep up. And I like that as a concept. What do you think about that?
I mean, it's pretty much spot on, and there's a few things that she said which mirror what you just said. One of the quotes that she went on record saying was that one of the reasons she withdrew was because she didn't want to risk doing harm to herself in the competition. Because when she got that score, she was obviously pretty cut up about it. She was unhappy. And she was worried that she would go out and really push herself to the absolute limit, potentially doing physical damage to herself in the process. So that was another reason that she pulled out, because the mental toll that it was taking on her from, well, I have to do the absolute best I can do now because of that.
Yeah, and she makes her living off the back of her body and the performance of it. Is that a fair statement? And so not putting it at risk I mean, as a middle-aged man, I watch these men and women do all the somersaults and stuff in the air and then land. And they're landing on crash mats, of course. But I always cringe at what it must be doing to their knees. And I don't know if that's just age. Do you do that as well? You just think, oh God, what's that doing to their knees?
Yes.
But maybe so it's not just me then. But yeah, it's thinking more long-term about, I mean, first of all, look at where she's come from. Look at all the achievements she's had. And in some ways, kind of, maybe the hunger's not there and she's happy to step back because her long-term legacy is secure. The other thing to say is the legacy or the standard that this sets for other people coming up in her wake, coming behind her. I think it's fantastic. The same as we were discussing, I think in episode 2 about Naomi Osaka, who has had her own trials and tribulations in the Olympics here this year as well. But the standard that this sets, that some things are more important than my performance here, despite the fact that I have dedicated years.
Have you read the quotes, or are you just really good at analysing people? Because what you're saying is essentially what she said. When you touched on the part of, maybe she's talked about getting older. Didn't you?
No, I didn't read that bit at all. But what I can speak from is a certain point of view, I suppose, of the fact that she's got a legacy. She's, as you say, the most successful gymnast that the US may have had, if not ever, then at least in modern times. And when you put yourself in a point of view of someone who's achieved that much, I guess I don't know. I mean, I do follow some sports very deeply. Like I go real deep into MMA and really follow a lot of the athletes there. And yeah, I mean, there's parallels: performance, stress, anxiety, toll on the body. All of that stuff is magnified when you make a living from being an athlete, I think.
She literally says, I'll just read a quote because I think it's really relevant to what you've just said. I don't trust myself as much anymore. Maybe it's getting older. There were a couple of days when everybody tweets you and you feel the weight of the world.
Wow. Yeah, that speaks for itself, doesn't it?
So I think it is just, I think there's definitely a pressure element of expectation because of how decorated she already is. I do think it probably all leads back to the mental state that maybe she was going into the competition, which is why she didn't get the score that she initially wanted. And that obviously mentally must be extremely difficult when you are already so decorated and people have these expectations of you. So that's probably going to take a massive mental toll on you, isn't it? When you underperform so much, given how decorated you already are and how well you've performed in the past. So then you kind of feel obligated to push yourself the extra mile to make up for that, which is obviously very dangerous.
Yeah, it would be very dangerous. And if we have these trailblazers like Naomi and like Simone, who are saying no, they're not saying no, never again. They're just saying no, not for right now. Thanks. And I think that just hopefully brings a bit of a sea change when it comes to professionals doing their work. I always tie it. I always try and loop it round to the impact it might have on us normal people, right? And if this is a sea change that's happening is this professional sport? Is this high-level sport? I don't know how we term it because I don't think the Olympic athletes get paid very, very much at all, do they? They don't get paid anything, do they? It's amateur, right?
I'm not actually sure, to be honest.
I don't think Olympic athletes get paid much, if anything, at all. I think their money comes through sponsorships that they might earn if they achieve really high heights in the Olympics, but I don't think the Olympics themselves pay much at all. But that's another big issue to unpack, not today. But yeah, there's something there about professionals or, high level performance people just saying, not right now. This isn't working for me. So I'm taking a step back. And, 2021 might be the year where we see that and we accept that. And that becomes more part of something that professional people do. Take a step back when they need to.
Yep. Again, you're echoing exactly what she's already said,
Okay.
which is terrific, because it's almost like you've read these quotes, but I know you haven't, which is great. She said, "We're not just athletes; we're people at the end of the day, and sometimes you just have to step back."
There you are.
Yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head, Chris.
Well, I think
the nail on the head.
Yeah, Simone said it better than me. More succinctly, I took about 5 minutes to say what she said in 30 seconds.
I mean, she also acknowledged that there is a big prevalence with mental health in sports right now, competition sports. So I think she said that she felt like there was more of an opportunity to step back and focus on her mental well-being because it's become more prominent. That kind of makes me wonder if in the past, let's say, before this was prevalent, would she have done the same?
Good question. So Naomi walked so Simone could run. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that idea. Yeah. And there's trailblazers who are setting the tone, and there's two of them right there. And to answer your question, I think she probably, if someone hadn't shown the way, hadn't laid the roadmap, then I think there would have been a bit more pressure on her, and that decision would have been a lot harder. She may well have made the same decision. We cannot possibly tell, but I applaud Simone for saying no in this context. Definitely.
Do you think, because I'm curious, just to ask you, do you think if she had gone ahead and still competed and pushed herself to the limit, I mean, what do you think the risks are of that? Because that's what I'm curious about.
Good question. So if we go back to last episode where we saw 3 men missed penalties, if they had felt, I don't know how they felt beforehand, but if they had felt out of sync in a similar way, and if they had felt that they could have the opportunity to say, can't do it right now, if they perhaps had I know they were so young, and I hesitate to use the word maturity, but maybe experience to know they're professional footballers. Of course, they're experienced to taking penalties, but not in the final of a huge tournament. If they had said, not today, and wanted to pull back or step back a little bit from the podium there, from the penalty spot there, I wonder if there's a parallel to draw there between Simone and them, right? If they had felt empowered, but then if they had scored those goals, they would have been, world champions, and they would have been feted by everybody in the media and the public and the press everywhere. I wonder if Simone had pushed herself. I mean, she's so experienced, she knows her limits. That's one of the things we can take away from there. We've got to trust people to know their own limits and the edge of their own capacity to perform in terms of, sport.
I think they are both team games as well. And I think that's an interesting dynamic to compare them both, in that obviously England, and she was participating in the women's Olympic team for the US. So she was participating in the women's gymnastics team for the US at the Olympics. So I think when it's a team sport, there's probably some additional pressure that you've got of not wanting to let down your team, because you don't take it all on your own shoulders. You're sharing it with everyone else that you're going into the competition with.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question to consider. If she had forged ahead, pushed through it, where would she be then? It might have crushed her. And I think with the experience she's got, I think she knows where the boundaries are. But then a lot of this sort of stuff is about recognizing the boundaries and overstepping them, that's where greatness is achieved. But let's not forget, she's already drawn that line. She's already great.
Yeah, that's true.
So she's putting other things ahead of the performance and the achievement that she believes are more important. And how could we possibly argue with that?
She's already achieved greatness. Yeah, that's totally right. So she's in a position now where she doesn't necessarily need to push herself to beyond the limit into those dangerous regions, because she's already achieved so much success. She probably does have more chance to be in charge of those emotions and take a step back and think of herself now, because like you say, she's already achieved so much. I mean, I was just looking at her age. She's only 24. So you need to think about, obviously she needs to think about when she retires. You don't want to end up in a situation where you've got your whole life ahead of you, and because of one mistake where you push yourself too far, it's ruined.
Yeah, she must be thinking ahead then, because professional gymnasts put such a toll on their body that they have a limited shelf life in terms of that level of performance. And I know a lot of professional sports do, and some don't. But yeah, at the age of 24, if you're considering retiring from this high level performance sport, then you got to think, like, what have I got for the rest of my life ahead of me? And I need to secure my physical and mental health for that. And I think she's done that. And I think she's done that very admirably and very clearly. There was no pullback and, talk of injury. There was pullback and talk of potential injury because I'm not where I need to be. And that begins to set a new precedent for, people all over the world when they're thinking about their performance, whether it's work, athletics, or sport, any sport.
Yeah, and what you've just said about the retirement as well, I've just looked that up, and like you say, it's early to mid 20s, which is very surprising for me. I mean, that obviously it does take a lot of physical toll on your body then if that is the average retirement age. And when you take that into consideration with Simone, she's pretty much on that precipice of retirement now. So it all becomes even more understanding of why she decided to do what she did, I think, now, given her age and where she's at in her career.
There we are.
Yeah. So we'll leave that one there, because I think we've said quite a bit. And obviously, we are very much in support of her doing it at this stage in her life, at this stage in her career. She's already achieved so much. So, take a step back and just think of yourself for a little bit. So moving on to the next topic. This is a study that actually came out recently, which is basically about middle-aged people and how in the UK, at least, they are now, according to this study, more unhealthy than they've ever been. And this is a lot of health issues. So I don't think we're going to focus on them all, but we can probably fire them off, but we'll kind of, I think, zone in on the mental health one. But obviously diabetes is higher. You've got heart conditions that are higher. You've got mental ill health that's higher, alongside other chronic conditions. I would just say to Chris, why? Why is this? Why are middle-aged people just at this point very unwell, according to this study, and more unwell than they've ever been at any point, apparently?
When I looked at this article that you're talking about, there were three things that stuck out for me. The first one was chronic back pain. The second one was mental ill health. And the third one was high blood pressure. And it doesn't say that there's more prevalence of these three coexisting. But these three do tend to coexist with the lifestyles that we have adopted through the prevalence of office work and manual work as well that is in the UK, and the kind of, we've also got the gig economy as well, where people are on 0 hours contracts and things like this. I cannot help but look at this through the prism of work, because we spend so much time doing it. So what are we doing majoritively in the UK? We're working. What sort of work are we doing? Well, we're either using our body to do the work, or we're using our brain, which requires us to sit.
Yeah.
So I would like to say that through my point of view, occupational health, it's probably a little bit skewed, because a lot of the people I see are office bound, and that is really the right term, bound. I'm consistently shocked by the number of people that feel like I'm giving them permission to get up. And they want me to write it in a medical report that they can get up every half an hour because they've got back pain, because otherwise people will question, why are you walking around so much? Anyone who's listening who works in an office, right? You have permission right now for your long-term health. You must get up at least every 45 minutes. If you have a pain problem, do it every half an hour. At least, and move around. I'm not asking you to move around 45 minutes to an hour and do a jog and sit down and do another half an hour of work and get up again. No, 3 to 4 minutes of movement. Change your activity. Stand up, move around. This is real physical health, like foundational stuff. And I see so many people with these chronic health conditions. This will not only help your chronic back pain, it will also help your mental health. It will also help your blood pressure, I have no doubt. A lot of these things accumulate because of the sense that people are chained to work. I talk to people about this regularly. Tell me what your day is like. Oh, 9 to 5. No, granular detail. Tell me when you begin. When is your first break? At what point do you get up from the desk? I want to know these level of details. Of course, not everybody is working at desks. Some people are driving vehicles. And when you're on a motorway and you've got a delivery expectation date or time, or maybe you're working for Amazon and you're driving around, maybe it's something like that, then you might be up and down out of the chair, but you out of the seat, the driving seat, but you also might not be.
Yeah.
So we need to think about less sedentary, more gentle activity. I'm not telling you to bust out like 100 press-ups every 20 minutes. Just get up, maybe do some stretching. We have a lot of, resources available to us. And, we can bring stuff like this to the table easily. Like, I've got it all. It's right here. I've got it all. We can give you some sort of desk stretches. You can Google search desk yoga. Desk yoga is a thing.
Standing desks? What
Standing
do you think
desks are great. Standing desks are fantastic. I have one. I have 2, actually. I have one at home and one in the office. I bought one for myself a couple of years ago. But, we're alternating between sitting and standing. We're not standing all day. That can be quite tiring, but also it's not very good for your legs. So alternating between sitting and standing is where I would take that sort of particular question along the way. There's a guy called Ricardo Semler, who runs a company in Brazil, who, this is the first guy I ever heard of it, had a treadmill desk. That was 20 years ago.
Wow.
But I know a lot of people tend to use them now. I don't know if I've got the mental capacity to walk and, work at the same time.
I was just about to say that would be difficult for me to just remain focused.
Yeah, when I used to go jogging with my dad when I was a teenager, he would talk to me and I wouldn't be able to keep up. And he would tell me that him and his mates at work would go jogging and try and do mental arithmetic while they were running. I don't know how people can do that. I didn't inherit my dad's brains, unfortunately. But we need to move more is the answer. And I wonder how, especially as we're moving into middle age, how much lifestyle stuff is to blame for the accumulation of, and remember, it's multiple health conditions as well, isn't it? So it's things like asthma or bronchial problems and or diabetes and or chronic back pain and or mental ill health, all of these things as a cluster of, more than one of them take from the cloud. So I believe there's lifestyle issues. There's things that have led up to where you find yourself in middle age, carrying
So
a few
I'm gonna
burdens.
ask you something quickly.
Go on.
Just jump in. You've talked about sedentary lifestyles and office jobs where you're sat in a desk. I think I'm curious to think about the flip side as well, because if you're in a job that's a overly physical labor job where you're working very intensely every day, lifting things, or, I don't know if you work in construction or something like that, I think they can often be as bad as being sedentary as well, because there's obviously overworking your body and there's underworking it. So I think there's two parallels that need to be explored.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right. So one that would come to mind is the Royal Mail, for example. I know of previous occupational health related colleagues who've done work for the Royal Mail or in the Royal Mail, and they've done some stuff to try and relieve some of the musculoskeletal, conditions that the work has led their staff to have. What I'm talking about is things like, the heavy bags of post carried on one shoulder consistently. Well, now, I see it around. I see people pushing trolleys full of the post. I see more Royal Mail cars, where people jump out the car with a lighter bag of mail, post it all, jump back in, and they've got another bag waiting for them for the next street. So there's a lot of these sort of things that offset that. But in terms of construction, I can't really speak reliably or informed about occupational health within the construction industry. But I would presume that there's been similar initiatives by professionals like me to offset some of the load of the work. Whenever you look at things like this, it needs to be done through a risk assessment. So a checkout assistant, for example, in a supermarket will have a very different level of risk for injury as someone on a construction site. So within the supermarket, it will be sort of more like repetitive strain injury, whether you would have that, no doubt, within a construction industry, but I also think it will be sort of overload injuries, disc issues, muscular tears or injuries along these lines. But as I say, I can't really speak with authority too much about the construction side of things. But your observation is absolutely right. There's two sides to the coin. There's the sedentary and there's the overloaded, perhaps is the opposite side. I'm not sure if that's the right word or not. But yeah, your point is absolutely spot on, golden, as usual.
I think it's worth saying as well that I don't think there's a perfect solution to this, because the career that you choose, I think obviously there's going to be certain situations, depending on whether you choose a physical job or a job that is more office based. I think there's things you can do to help, but there's not going to be a perfect remedy, is there? I think over time you're still going to accumulate things just through age and through life, probably related to the career, even if you try as hard as you can to mitigate them.
Yeah. I mean, I can speak of a wedding that I was just at a couple of days ago that was on a hotel that also has an animal sanctuary attached to it. And we went on a safari, and the man who was driving the van on the safari part, who was also an animal care technician, I believe is the right term, was saying about how a rhino tried to take him out. So you've got levels of yeah. He was talking on his mic.
That's quite a story.
I know, and he was like, "I'll tell you about it later." And it was a really interesting tale about and they've made up apparently. The rhino kissed him. And
that's good.
Yeah, but he was telling a really interesting story about how the rhino tried to take him out one day, and I mean that is life and death stuff, isn't it? So whatever you're doing, there will be a concurrent impact, whether you're sitting all day or moving around all day, or working at height, or working with pneumatic drills, or working with rhinos. It carries its risks, and these will need to be assessed, of course, but also there is, like what I always talk about with mental health, right? There is the capacity for you to do some self-care to offset some of the impact. So I've given you advice about what to do in terms of sedentary lifestyles. From the other side of the coin, then you've got to, when you're more active in your lifestyle, you've got to embrace some of the self-care and activities that perhaps a physical athlete might do. Things like self-massage, relaxation, cold baths, things like this that will help you recover from the physical sides of your work as well. That's what I would suggest. But again, straying right up to the bounds of my own, capacity to advise or my own personal experience here, I think.
No, I think that's all great stuff. I mean, and it's fairly common sense stuff as well, in that you should just be doing that anyway to look after yourself. But I'd just quickly throw myself in as an example, in that some careers you go into, and I think you just have to accept that it's part and parcel of the career as well. And it may affect you in the future. Like, for example, I'm in a career which involves a lot of video equipment and video gear and carrying heavy loads quite a lot of the time. I'm sure that's probably going to result in something when I'm older, and it's very hard to mitigate stuff like that, because obviously you can do things like manual handling training and all this sort of stuff to kind of show you how to carry things. But even if you carry something perfectly and remember the training spot on, and you lift it the correct way and you pull it the correct way, that's only going to mitigate the damage. It's not going to stop it. So it's going to lessen the impact, but it's still going to take its toll on you if you've done it for like 20, 30 years of your life. And I think there has to be some form of acceptance of, this is the career I've chosen. I have to some degree, expect certain things when I'm older, because we put a lot of toll on our bodies, I think, that maybe they were not necessarily designed for. Would you agree?
Well, I think I would agree to a certain extent. I mean, we are evolved, designed, however we've been wired, whatever we want to term it, to function more sort of broadly than just, pinned into one repetitive task over and over, or, a whole day in a cubicle, over and over for a period of months, years, decades. Whatever it is, the advice that I would give is to vary your activities. That's what I think that's the best advice I could possibly give. Of course, as well, there's the risk assessment side of things. I agree with you on one level that regardless of what you're doing, your work will have an impact on your health. There is stuff that work needs to do to offset that, and there's stuff that you can do to offset that that's within your power. But of course, like, if you're demolishing buildings and you're breathing in asbestos dust, there isn't much you can do yourself to offset that. It's for the employer to do. So we've got to make sure that I don't overload the individual with the responsibility here to offset their risks at work. But what I'm trying to get at is, if you're in a manual job, like carrying around Royal Mail stuff, and your shoulder is, jacked because you've been carrying a heavy bag on it for years, ask if you can, offset that, find a way at work and out of work to find, to rebalance that. Take the holistic approach, the all around 360-degree approach to improving that side of things.
I think what you've said pretty much perfectly articulates what I was trying to say, because I think what you've said is what I was getting at, in that our bodies are designed to do lots of things. I mean, like you say, but I think we're not designed to do them perpetually over and over for long periods of time. I think we're designed to do a lot of varied stuff and not kind of stick to one particular task and just do it over and over and over again, because that wear and tear will accumulate in the certain places where we have repeated that task over and over again. So we're very adaptable creatures, but we need to know our limits as well. I think that's what I was trying to get at, and that accumulation is natural, and it's going to happen.
So let's broaden it out a little bit to the other aspects of lifestyle, just to close the loop on this particular thing about middle-aged life and health. So the thing that the study also drew upon was pollution. not much that I can do about the pollution that I breathe because I live next to a main arterial road into London, except move house, right? The second thing that it brought up was things like diet. Now, I don't know how you feel about this, but I've got a particular issue with the way certain diets are marketed, and we're straying away a little bit there. But when it comes to low fat, high sugar content foods, and these being marketed as being healthy, low fat yogurts that are just crammed full of sugar, this is what I'm talking about. So we needed to take a little bit more agency about what we're eating and drinking. And then the other thing is the drinks as well, right? So we've got alcohol use as well. So these are the things that, and they're all the fun things, the nice tasting food, the alcohol, all of this. We have to take some personal agency there, and we've also got to take some good advice from doctors and professionals and scientists and things like that as well. So there's a much wider thing than work when it comes to answering the question of why middle-aged people are carrying with them so many chronic health problems. I think, just like reduce your alcohol, reduce your sugar, get more rest, take care of yourself, physically and mentally, is what I'd like to leave everybody with, I think.
Yeah, I was just about to say, you don't need to cut all that stuff out completely. I don't think that doesn't really need to be an all or nothing approach unless it's really, really impacting on your life and you're not somebody who can moderate. But I think for the majority of people, it is just about moderation. It's just about thinking about your consumption and not overdoing it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's a good place to leave it. I don't know, though. We haven't talked actually about mental health, have we?
No, I suppose we haven't.
We've gone on a massive conversation about everything except mental health. But it all plays into mental health. And I think we can probably close on that in that, all those, like, if you're over consuming on things like bad food and alcohol, and you're in a job which is putting lots of toll on your body, either mentally or physically, it's gonna impact on your mental health. And then obviously you've got middle age, which, as you've discussed in previous episodes, seems to be a bit of a trigger point for mental health conditions or issues to surface at that point in time.
I think it's really easy for me to sort of flippantly throw this out. And of course, I don't want anyone to think, or especially you, Tom, that I believe this wholeheartedly, because it's not always true. But I do think if you put quality in, you get quality out of your life. If you put quality time into looking after your mind, looking after your physical health, if you put time into putting in quality food and drinks, I'm talking about water really more than anything else, not like really expensive alcohol, but quality foods. You look at the labels, you make your decisions, but with knowledge of what's good and bad for your body. Quality input gets quality output. I do believe that. It's like if you there's a time and a place for vegging out watching something like Love Island, isn't there, right? But like if you also spend a similar amount of time reading a good book, learning a new skill, something like that, that's all quality inputs, isn't it? Rather than scrolling through Instagram. There's time and a place for these things. And like you say, don't overdo it in one of those areas.
And that's a perfect place to leave it, I think. So with that, we're going to go and jump into the Q&A. So we'll see you in a second.
Q&A.
And welcome back. We are in the Q&A section now, and we have a question this week. As always, going to get Chris to read it out. Who's it from, Chris, and what is the question?
So the question today comes from someone we'll call WL, and it says, how do you get someone to open up when they don't want to talk? When you know they're depressed or struggling somehow, can you get them to talk and open up when they're hiding it? So I think I'd like to term this particular sort of question in the realm of moving beyond I'm fine. Yeah, moving beyond I'm fine. Whenever you ask someone how you doing, what you get back generally is a variation of I'm fine. And if you know that that's not right, there's some things you can do, and there's some things you probably shouldn't do. But I'd like to talk about this a little bit because I think it's really good. So when you're asking people, like when you get asked, Tom, how are things, how often do you reply with the gospel truth of precisely how you're doing?
Never.
Yeah, me too, right? I thought so, because often it's just not part of the social contract to launch into a conversation about all the things that you've got going wrong for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Most of the
Absolutely.
time I'll say, yeah, good. How are you? Yeah. It's the expectation that when we're passing in a corridor or we're just, chatting generally at the beginning of a conversation about something else, that we don't launch into it.
Mm-hmm.
So I would be as guilty as anyone in responding this way. But how often are you left sometimes when you get that response, Tom, when you're left with an instinctual feeling that something is not right? And do you know what to do, how to follow up that I'm fine, or, yeah, fine, thanks, how are you? Sometimes we're left with that sort of feeling, aren't we? That sort of instinctual feeling that they're not fine.
I think some people are very good at hiding it. Others, there is, like you say, there is a tell, and there is definitely something not right. But how do you approach those conversations? That's a difficult one.
Very good question. This is one that I get asked a lot. I get asked for advice on this particular problem an awful lot. And so you won't be surprised. I've got a few things to talk about. I think I've got 5 things to talk about, actually. So we'll go through each one in turn. And some of these I've come up with, some of these have come from friends, because I'm really lucky to have a close circle of friends that, people love me, man. So it's great that they notice when I'm dipping and I'm throwing out those stock phrases like I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
They can sense that anyway, but we'll get to that. So the first one is ask again, maybe with different words. That's what I would say. I sometimes would throw out there, are you sure? Nice, short, succinct, to the point, demonstrating that you care, demonstrating that you really genuinely want to know more. And then perhaps there's an opportunity there for them to open up. It's a nice, safe and straightforward way to enter into a conversation. Are you sure? Ask with genuine empathy and care and understanding.
There's a real nice mental health campaign that is all about asking twice as well, which is time to change. Yep. And it's been absolutely everywhere. So if you're not aware of that, check it out.
If you're a manager or a director or in charge, signing the time to change pledge is a really good idea. If you're in charge of a business or a department or a director, get it on the agenda wherever you are in terms of, what you're doing, because it does signal to the people that work there that you are signing up to a pledge. So yeah, I fully agree. A pledge that is geared towards equality, relieving discrimination, all of those really good things. And it doesn't cost much to sign up to do those things. Are you with me? Another way that I would like to so that was the first point. Ask again, or, are you sure? Something like that. Just follow it up. Follow your instinct and follow it up. The next one is, whether it's football, cricket, Avengers, or Love Island, begin a conversation around that. I'm really lucky in that it's a really good opener for a conversation there. But the chap I was talking about earlier on during the jiu-jitsu bit, Alan, I bumped into him in the street a couple months ago, and we had a conversation, and it was fine. And I wasn't in a good place. And he texted me later, and he said, "Good to see you, but did I sense a disturbance in the force?" And I thought that was a particularly good one, but Alan's pretty good though. But these sort of things, just having a conversation, maybe that's sort of based around something else, that could potentially lead on. So that's really more about sort of having a conversation that, did you watch the match? Did you see the Avengers movie, or, WandaVision, Loki, that whatever it is?
That one is going to be heavily reliant on emotional intelligence, isn't it? Because you have to be able to read what that conversation at that time. You need to know what that person is interested in topic wise. So you have to have a bond with them to be able to relate it to a topic that they're more open to talking about. But how would you engage in that with, say, a stranger?
We could talk about something that's more broadly on the sort of agenda, if you like, of the country, or, something that's been happening in the news, or host a conversation, begin a conversation along those lines about, hopefully something that's a bit more positive than the football was, but it was pretty positive at one point. You could have that as a conversation. There is a lot out there that's negative, isn't it? And it would be really easy to bring up bad stuff about, the pandemic, or about the government and all of this or other sort of stuff, but keeping it general. But then the person that this question came from was really more sort of, because I know them, more sort of in the direction of someone that you know. So what I would like to suggest is, maybe this second point could be just sort of rephrased a little bit, perhaps as talk about something else, talk about an interest, talk about something that could take you into a deeper conversation about something else in the newspaper, in the news, in the public eye, something like that, which will then lay a foundation for a much deeper one at a later point, within the same conversation, if that's possible. But these 5 bits that I'm going to talk about today, it's not one or the other. Point 2 could lead on to point 1. Earlier on when you said that you were fine, are you sure you're okay? After a conversation about the Avengers or the football or the cricket.
So you're saying that that initial conversation kind of opens them up a bit, so they're more likely to open up when you ask them again if they're okay?
I think so. Definitely works for me. So the third one is to show a little bit of vulnerability. And this, I don't know how you feel about this, and I don't know how other people would. I think it depends on the context. And I think it depends on how well and how much you trust the person. You could say along the lines of, glad you're all right. I'm having a tough time myself, if I'm honest. Or work's been tough lately, hasn't it? Something like that. Showing a little bit of vulnerability it's funny how that works, can help it be sort of reciprocated a little bit. So expressing it, and it helps to remind the other person that you're human too, not just, just not an unfeeling, unthinking person, I suppose. I was going to say NPC there, but I'm not sure if many people would know what I mean by that.
Non-playable character.
Yeah. So, it's really valuable, I think, to get people to open up. It demonstrates a little bit of trust in them, and trust is often reciprocated when you demonstrate trust. So first of all, you're showing a bit of vulnerability. Things have been tough at the moment around the office, haven't they, with everything that's been going on. I'm glad you're all right. I'm not really at the moment, but I'm okay. Are you sure you're okay? And you begin to use some more of those. I
think there's something that I'd tie into that quickly, which is, because I've done it myself. Sometimes I think being vulnerable yourself to get them to open up a little more is a great point. But sometimes you yourself don't have anything vulnerable to open up about.
Exactly.
I've been in that position where I'm actually quite happy what I have. So it's very hard to be vulnerable.
And that was the last point that I was going to make within that. It's got to be authentic. You've got to actually have something to say that you are struggling with at the moment, because otherwise it won't be reciprocated if it just comes across like you're acting. Because
that was what I was about to ask.
Yeah.
Is it okay to, I wouldn't say make up a vulnerability, but is it okay to?
No.
So it's not okay under any circumstances, even just to flower something up a little bit to be
more. Now I'm trying to think of if there is a capacity to flower something up to make it all right, so that you can make a connection. But personally, I wouldn't. But then you know how I feel about authenticity. And remember, this isn't a 5-step process. This isn't do the first one, then do the second one, then do the third one, do the fourth one, and do the fifth one. It's not the 5-step process. These are just 5 ideas that I got when I'm talking to people and they ask me this question all the time. It's 5 things that I've come through with. So all I want to really leave people thinking about when it comes to the third one is, a bit of vulnerability. If it feels right, if it's authentic, if it's right, do so. So the next one that I like to put out there, and I wonder how you feel about this one, Tom. I think that you might like this one the best, is got it. Got it. Thanks. You know where I am if you need me. What that does is it shows that, yeah, understood, you're fine, right? But if you're ever not, you know where I am. I'm right here. I might even signal a little bit that I've noticed a change and I'm not going to challenge it. You say you're fine. That's great. But you're delivering a frank reminder of, where you are if you're needed. And that can really be valuable. When someone's feeling like alone or low or down or broken, or however we want to term it, got it. You know where I am if you need me. Along those lines. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, no, that's good, especially for people who are someone who's more introverted, maybe someone who it's difficult to get them to open up on the spot. If you just give them a line and let them reach out to you when they're ready, that can often be a good way to put them in control of the conversation and let them talk to you when appropriate for them. Again, I would say it depends on the character of the person, like whether you're dealing with someone who's quite extroverted and outgoing, or whether you're dealing with someone who's a bit more closed off and maybe they need a bit more time to come out with those issues.
Yeah, in which case you might not be the right person for them to talk to. They might not want to open up to you. In which case that's fine. You've done your best. And hopefully there will be someone that they will open up to. So I like that one. I do like that one. Got it. You know where I am if you need me. I use that a lot, but I wonder if that's just my nature to, be supportive, try and be supportive to people without, forcing it on anyone, without being oppressive with it. And I wonder if all of these are very much, I wonder if you were left when we've gone through all of them with the sense that these are sort of more backdoor entries rather than right through the front door, because I always think through the back door is a little bit more subtle. That was a weird metaphor.
To be honest, I end quite a lot of my conversations with, friends or colleagues or whatever. I usually end them with, you know where I am if you need me, or something along those lines. I think that's a good conclusive statement for a conversation, just as a way of keeping the door open, really, and a way of saying, it's a conclusive statement, but it's not, because you're still there if they need you.
Yeah, I've been managing someone for a few years now, and I said this so many times now that at the end of any one-to-one or any sort of contact we have together, he was always like, "I know where you are if I need you, Chris." He always just ends it with you don't need to say it. Don't worry about me. I know where you are if you need me, because I'll constantly sort of check in and making sure. I don't know. Anyway, so that was that. So got it. You know where I am if you need me, along those sort of lines. And the last one is a little bit linked to the second one. How's work? So when you get back that I'm fine, how's work? Or a variation of that. It's not snoopy, not like being nosy, trying to find out too much information about their life. So might be how's work. It might be how's your week. It might be how was your holiday. All really good open questions to get a conversation rolling. And we've got to remember that, we're not always entering a conversation like this to get an outcome. The outcome might be building trust rather than they're going to go to their GP tomorrow and get cured. Or, my supportive conversation has directed them towards the Samaritans or something like that. It might just be fostering trust. So it might seem like these are really dull questions, but once again, it's what you do with, the responses that you get and the direction that the conversation goes. And you can always guide that conversation towards the topic of well-being. I think you can always, reasonably direct a conversation about how's your week, direct a conversation about how's work, how was your holiday, all of these sort of things about, supportive in terms of well-being, in terms of mental health, self-care, professional help if necessary. All of these sort of things can reasonably be covered. But at the very least, you can, demonstrate interest, real interest in the individual, and build some trust and maybe a bit of rapport. I don't know, but that's something else.
Okay, so here's something I'm going to ask then before we wrap it up, because I think this is probably the last thing, because you've answered that question really well, which would be, how many times do you ask? Because, and this is from my experience, if somebody, or maybe I'll rephrase it to, how many times do you ask if it's clear that that person has something on their mind, but they're not talking about it? Because I've had this in the past, I think, and I've asked and I've asked and I've asked. And obviously you don't want to ask too much, because that's also bad, because they might not be ready to talk about it. And if you keep asking, that's quite intrusive. So I will usually try asking a few times, and then I'll just end it with, well, you know where I am if you need me, something like that, and then put the ball in their court. So is that what you would advocate? Yeah,
that's absolutely perfect. Because I think if you go beyond that, you become badgering and nagging. I don't think there is necessarily a right. I mean, these are 5 tips that I'm throwing out there. This is not like a recipe. This is not a precise recipe. There is no right or wrong way, I think, as long as it comes from a place of authenticity and care and concern. And to answer your question, I think your deployment of a few of these together at once, like you described, was absolutely perfect. It leaves the person knowing that you'll be a supportive ear if and when necessary. And provided whatever you get back, you're always sort of non-judgmental about and open-minded about in terms of where the conversation goes, then I think it can generally go to a supportive therapeutic place. We got to take what comes back seriously. And if it is, no, literally, I'm fine, but, they don't want to talk to you about it. It's not badger people. It's, it's within their agency to decide that they don't want to talk to you about what's going on for them. It might be deeply personal. There's been times, when I've met people who just locked door, and we've got to accept that. There's been times I will put my hand on my heart and say that I have been that locked door, and I just won't let anyone in. It's just like, I don't want to talk to you about this problem that I've got right now. And that's entirely legitimate. Where I am if you need me is legitimately like a perfectly good way of being supportive to someone. I'm trying to think of a step further that might be like even better. But that could be just letting them know about the support that's available. But again, that could like put their nose out of joint. If there's genuinely nothing wrong and they've just got a headache or something like that, and they don't want to tell you they got a headache, because why do you keep asking me if I'm fine? There's a point. And so to answer the question, I don't think there is a set number of times that you should ask. There is that campaign that says ask twice. But really, with these 5 tips that we've spoken about here, these 5 ideas that I've had in terms of responses to questions I get asked all the time, I think they're all different. I do think they're all different, and they're all different ways of arriving at the same destination.
Like you say, they're quite open-ended points, which you can juggle around, join them together, use them in whatever kind of formula you need. Obviously, every situation with that sort of stuff is going to be unique. So part of it is going to be on the individual listening to this to take those points and use them based on what that person is dealing with.
Yeah.
And how they need to deal with that person.
I cannot give a script. I just cannot reliably give people a script because, again, it won't come across very well. Second of all, like, every person on the face of this earth has got a different way of expressing themselves. And so finding the right voice in which to express concern and have a conversation about getting someone some help will be different for every different person. So there's my 5 tips to run through them very briefly again. Ask again, are you sure? And then the next one, was have a supportive conversation around something else. Did you see Love Island? Did you see The Avengers? Did you watch the cricket? Did you see the football? Something where hopefully there is a link of mutual interest in order to have that conversation. Glad you are. I'm having a tough day, to be quite honest, or I'm having a tough morning. A little chink of vulnerability, and this is really good when there's a power differential. When you're the manager, you're the senior person, and I talk about this all the time with businesses. Have someone at the top show some leadership when it comes to this. Maybe demonstrate some vulnerability if you're comfortable, but you don't have to. But it's just demonstrate a little bit there. Got it. You know where I am. I'll call this the Tom from now on. Got it. You know where I am if you need me, because that's your I'm sure well used and regularly trotted out phrase, which will be very good. And how's work? How's your week? How's your morning? Stuff like that to just bring a conversation away from a very closed. Because this question was really arisen from somewhere where it's like, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Or how are you doing? Yeah, I'm fine. That sort of, it's closed. The shop front is closed. Okay, well, let's move from this closed position and hopefully make it an open one. You with me?
Yeah, 100%. Great stuff.
WL, let us know. There is no recipe or right way or wrong. Of course, there's wrong ways of doing things. Inauthenticity would be the wrong way of doing it. I think also the wrong way would be to minimize whatever problem you receive back from the individual. It's like, why are you so worried about that? That's not a big deal. Always try and recognize that whatever you're getting back from the person is real for them. Yeah. So there's a few things about what not to do. But hopefully those 5 tips about what you can do to move past I'm fine can help.
Yeah, no, great stuff. I agree with it all. 5 really good points. I hope we have helped. What was the name again? WL?
WL.
Yep, I hope we've helped WL. Please feel free to get in touch if you have anything else to say, or if you just want to let us know that we have helped. And I think that's it for Q&A. We went into a lot of detail with that question, actually. It was a good one. So on that note, let's jump into the In Clinic now, which is the final part of our podcast. We have quite an interesting topic this week, which I have discussed at the start, which is about what do we do if therapy doesn't work. So we'll jump into that in a minute. In Clinic. Welcome back. We're at the In Clinic section now, where Chris takes the leading role and I am the color commentary, to paraphrase wrestling. So this section, obviously, we've got deeper topics, deeper discussion, and something that I think it was me who found this article. I sent it to Chris, and I thought it was kind of an interesting devil's advocate thing to talk about, because obviously we're always advocating therapy, and we still do advocate therapy. Like if you need professional help, you should get professional help. But for some people, they've obviously gone through the system, they've had the therapy, maybe it hasn't worked for them. For some people, it might have made the situation worse. I think in the majority of cases, therapy does work, and I'm sure Chris will advocate for it when I jump across to him. But obviously, what do people do when therapy doesn't work, Chris? I mean, what are the avenues?
Well, this topic was sparked really by a conversation that you and I have had off the air, where it was along the lines of, in order to be authentic, we have to remain balanced at all times. And we can't, there is no one recipe to fix the problem of mental health. And while we do talk about therapy, counseling, talking therapies broadly, and self-help, not everything is for everybody. And where one person might gain the benefit of talking therapies, another person might not, and would much be better served by taking antidepressants. It's just everybody is different and not everything is for everybody. And I think I've made that pretty clear. But when you look at the topic a little more deeply, especially with the article that was bouncing around in a WhatsApp group that we've got about this, about the podcast and our conversations and things like this, what I began to realize that a lot of the barriers to therapy being therapeutic were human. Did you notice that too?
Yeah, I did.
Well, I think a lot of them in the article that we looked at were to do with the person giving the therapy. And a lot of it was, about lack of qualification or, the incorrect use of a title. And I was surprised, believe it or not, that the term counsellor, psychotherapist, are not actually protected characteristics, that you must be qualified in order to call yourself these things. And I also learned along the way as well. Did you know that the term lawyer is unprotected as well? Solicitor.
No, I did not.
I know, I was shocked. Like, solicitor is protected. So you can't call yourself a solicitor unless you are a solicitor.
But you can call yourself a lawyer.
You can call yourself a lawyer if you just got a bit of general knowledge about the law and decided to open an office and give people advice. And it's the same, apparently, with counsellor and psychotherapist. Now, I am surprised by this. And I do think it needs regulation. I did a little bit of looking on some counselling website, directory websites. And I actually clicked through to see what the registration process was like. Some of them, the big ones, actually ask you to give them your qualifications. It's a drop-down list. And I mean, I didn't go beyond that. I'm sure if I clicked one of those, they would have asked me to upload a copy of my certificate. I'm sure. But I'm not like a qualified counsellor, really. So I'm not on those websites. What I am qualified in is occupational health, and I've got some, mental health, additional training within that as well that enables me to help support individuals, and also mental health first aid. I'm an accredited trainer there. So there's the things that I can do. I could set up clearly on a website and call myself a counsellor, but that's not authentic. And I crave authenticity almost as much as I crave security in life. So these unprotected things, it's a problem, I think. And herein lies the issues with human factors on the professional side, I think, right? So this is where we're talking about the idea that a qualification doesn't necessarily guarantee that the therapist is going to be competent, but it surely helps over a sea of ineptitude of people who've just decided that because they think they're pretty good at giving advice to their friends and they've read a few articles about it, that they're going to start providing that support to other people. That may be cynical of me, but it certainly seems, when you look at the stories of the people that have lived through this stuff, that that's the case sometimes. So the first thing I would say is try and access counselling through a reputable site or a reputable service like your GP. If the waiting list's long, try and find out if there's an agency that the GP knows about that is private, that you can pay to access, or reputable sources, not the card in the window of the newsagent or not some dodgy looking website on the internet. I would like
someone that you found on Gumtree.
Someone that you found on Gumtree or Facebook or something like this. Absolutely with you. Yeah, we need to make sure that we're going to reputable places to get this information. One reputable place could be your employer's EAP service or counseling provider. So EAP stands for Employee Advisory Program. They will all have their own way of engaging with accredited counselors so that you can connect with them. Beyond that, then there's a few websites that I really should have for you that we can perhaps put in the show notes or something like that. We can put out there for people to hopefully feel a little bit more confident if they're looking for counselors. But it is a very, very tricky thing. It's very, very tricky for me to authoritatively say this website is the one. This is perfect. This is where you're going to find it. A couple of years ago, go on.
No, I was going to say the bit that you mentioned about the lawyer and the qualifications. I mean, that it's in the article that we threw around on WhatsApp. It's in there as well. That I'm just reading it now to refresh my brain. But therapists don't have to belong to a register to practice, and they can call themselves. Basically, anyone can call themselves a psychologist and practice, which is. To me, that's absolutely insane.
I know.
Because when you hear someone is a psychologist, you would, I mean, unless you're aware of everything after reading something like this, you would just assume by having that title that they've gone through the proper process, wouldn't you?
I would expect at least some sort of qualification. I mean, this is the front and center piece of advice when you're looking for a therapist. If you're not going through one of these services that I've described, like the GP or an EAP, if you're not going through one of those, if you've gone through a website, ask what the qualifications are. You could reasonably ask to see what the professional CV is or something akin to that. It's got what the qualifications are. Where I work, I have to put my qualifications at the end of my medical reports, and I think is it at the end of my. I've got some of my qualifications at the end in my email signature as well. So people know who they're talking to, like what expertise this person has. So you must ask, you really, really must. Even if you are going through the GP, etc., if you want to know, ask.
Do you think most professionals like yourself then, do you think they would, if I got in touch and I wanted therapy or I wanted, support with a professional, and I just reached out and I said, I would like to see your qualifications before, we sign up for this. I actually want to see them, like send me a photograph or something of the certificate just as proof. Do you think most, if they are working professionals and they actually have the qualifications, would be perfectly happy to send them over?
Yeah, my nursing stuff can be found on the internet. Any doctor's stuff can be found on the internet. A lot of the counselling directory websites that I looked at have the qualifications listed. They do their due diligence. I'm sure they ask for certificates and it goes through a process of moderation. But if you feel like you need that additional layer of, clarity and understanding about exactly what you're getting into, then ask. Do ask. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I wouldn't. In fact, I would applaud you, Tom, if before you came to see me for your first appointment, you had emailed in to the office and said, "Can I just make sure that I'm seeing the right person?" There is a thing there. It's absolutely legitimate. Like, you wouldn't go to a financial advisor that's got less money than you, would you? So you've got to make informed decisions, and that's what this is all about, isn't it? And if you're going for NHS treatment, then you can look up the clinicians that are seeing you. I don't know why it would be any different for counselling, but we have gone in some way to answer your question, haven't we? Because my perception of the problem that was within the article that we were sharing and we were examining was there is a lot of essentially cowboys and cowgirls and cow people who were like operating unlicensed, if you like, even though it's not a licensed space. And that was doing damage. Your question was different, but I felt it was important to cover that stuff. Your question, Tom, was a lot more to do with if therapy doesn't work. So my answer to that is why. So it could have failed. What they call it is a rupture. Could have failed for innumerable reasons, okay? But some of the reasons that it seems to break down are human, like we said, unqualified, or are human in that you just don't get on with the person. And you can work through that because actually, I don't know how you feel about this, but I thought you were quite a difficult person to deal with the first time I met you. But when you came to feel heard and listened to, it completely changed. So you weren't a difficult person, but I felt you started off being a difficult person, but we found a way through it together, I think, because I didn't let that judgment that I had colour the consultation. And and we conjured trust. You felt heard and listened to and felt that you could trust me with the information that you were giving out. And that happens a lot when it can start off a little bit sort of not adversarial, but just sort of closed. And then, we can work to open.
Why did you think I was difficult? Was it difficult based on the report you had been given? Was it a difficult case, or was it just difficult based on how I came in?
How you came in. So it was your body language, and the things you were saying were, if I remember correctly, now I'm here. As if here was a place that you didn't want to be, and that's fine.
That's absolutely true. I did say that.
Yeah, and I think I offered you the door. You don't have to be here, man. Honestly, I don't mind. Like, we can talk and it might help, or you can go, in which case it definitely won't help, but it's your choice. You walk through the door, you can walk out of it any time. I don't mind. It means nothing to me, but I'd like to try and help. That was the energy that I come to these things with. And it wasn't long at all before it got turned around, but sometimes it never does. And so maybe I'm just not the right person for you, and that's fine. And therefore the door is right there. All right. But I think I get paid anyway. But I think if I'm relying on the money from you because it's a private engagement, then the angle that someone might take will be a little bit different, wouldn't it? Try and encourage you to stay regardless. And some of the stuff I read about in that article is just like, how? I shouldn't be surprised because human nature is the way it is. But how are you going to carry on like that? And I do hear sometimes about, some things that people have been, told in counselling. You just think, what? One that comes to mind was when the person started talking about their husband and the difficulties they were having with their partner. I'm not a marriage counsellor. How is that the right thing to say in any context, in any therapeutic context? Just shut you down there and to completely build a wall. I'm not a marriage counsellor. Stop talking about your husband. Jeez.
Yeah, that's terrible. But I'm sure they can recommend you one who's friends with them and probably nice bit of money in the back pocket.
Commission. So what's the barrier is the question, right? Is it a personality? Is it like a behavioral thing? Is it something just intrinsically about the individual that you don't like and therefore you're not going to trust and build rapport and therapy will ensue? Fine. If that's not the issue, what is it? Is it the style? Are you hoping for something that's more along the lines of Freudian sort of psychotherapy or CBT or, whatever it is? What is it that you're looking for? That can be informed by the qualifications of the individual as well, right? Or do you just find you just can't talk about yourself and your feelings? There's a block there and it's uncomfortable and it's icky and you can't go there. Okay. What do we do about that? Well, hopefully we can reinforce some of the self-care stuff. You can do it yourself. Maybe you would rather talk to a computer, as we've spoken about. There's some good apps out there. Or maybe you just might need to sort of work through that to build trust. I spoke about it before, but that young chap, Joey Essex. He was one of those people that just couldn't fathom discussing this because there was no trust. But he worked through it because the end goal was worth more to him than the initial pain and difficulty of opening up.
It's like cracking an egg. No, it's a weird analogy, but they've got a shell that you need to get through, which is kind of like their barrier.
Yeah. Yeah, to get to delicious stuff inside, you've got to break the shell.
But I want to ask you something.
Yeah, please.
Leading on from this. I don't know how you're going to answer this. Maybe you won't answer it all, but we'll give it a go. Do you think that sometimes counselors, therapists, do you think sometimes they can actually put thoughts in the patient's head that or kind of make them think something that isn't actually there, lead them on a false journey?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even accredited ones, professional ones.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm reminded of someone actually who was prescribed counselling by their GP for chronic fatigue. And their counsellor, when they were coming to see me, they were saying, like, God, I must sound like such a... Okay, talking to you once every 2 months feels better than talking to my counsellor every week because the connection's not there. And what happened, and they were qualified, but what happened was they were trying to impress upon them their own matrix, if you like, of how this person should feel and recover from chronic fatigue. I think when a counsellor or a talking therapist, I don't know how we should term it, but let's call it broadly a talking therapist. Let's do that. So when a talking...
Or just a professional.
Some of them aren't. Well, I guess if they're getting paid for it, they're technically a professional. Yes. But when one of these... So when a cowboy enters a saloon... No, when a therapist enters into a therapeutic relationship with their own matrix or prism or judgment of what's going to help this person, then I think that is where it gets to the point that you're talking about, where it could end up being unhelpful and you could implant. Because what this person was saying was that they should use this weird spiritual process of relieving the chronic fatigue when the person was just not that sort of cuckoo sort of like spiritual type of person. And I say that as a fully signed up card carrying member of the cuckoo spiritual elite, right?
Yeah.
But what I would say is that they were very rational, logical, and they just, weren't into doing any of the stuff that this, and there was resistance from the other side that this was somehow like a barrier to them getting well. So they tried it. They didn't like it. And it didn't make them worse, but it could have. And they're just every time they're seeing them, they're just constantly losing legitimacy in the mind of the client. So there's that sort of thing that can happen, to answer the question. But we have to be careful not to stray into reinforcing a myth that talking about mental health implants mental ill health in the individual's psyche, and especially asking about suicide does not implant the idea in the person's psyche. I know that's not what you're saying, but I would hate for that to be misunderstood by anybody. Yeah. So you can take people down a rabbit hole as a therapist if you're not receptive or emotionally intelligent enough to notice that this person just doesn't want to go down that pathway, right? I've had it where I actually don't think I could help the person because everything that was in my power, my capacity to advise, my experience to advise, just didn't work. I even went, and started trying to think up new ways. I mean, it was someone who was living with depression, but they just couldn't find anything in their day to look forward to. Now, of course, like I'm not the counselor, I'm not the therapist that's going to help uncover that. But I was trying to find some self-help activities that this person could engage with. And I was, talking to them on a regular basis. I think I saw this person like 5 or 6 times. And the normal stuff didn't really, I say the normal stuff, but it's stuff that, 99% of people gain some benefit from, like it's stuff we always talk about, the professional side, talking therapies, antidepressants, GP, self-help stuff. Then you've got, exercise, self-help, you've got meditation, journaling, all of this. It just wasn't landing.
I just want to clarify that I don't even necessarily think that. So you've got the cowboy therapists that you've talked about who probably do that. They probably, if they're putting thoughts in someone's head, then it's obviously because they're a cowboy and they either want to refer you to one of their friends who they can get commission from, or they want you to keep coming to them so they can keep making money. So you've obviously got that side of the cowboy therapist there. They're a complete no. Obviously we don't advocate them because they might not even be qualified. But then I think you can still, we're all human. We're all biased, and in some way, we all have our interests, don't we? And things that we advocate above others. So I think if you're just going to go into the realm of unconscious bias, can even therapists who are really in tune and try to remain as unbiased as possible, there's got to, you can't eliminate the unconscious bias completely, can you? Surely not.
No, there's exercises that you can do to get out of the way of your own self in order to help people. You can, examine the window on the world that you peer through. I like to think of it as like, you've got lenses. You've heard of the term rose tinted glasses. Well, we've all got tinted glasses on because of, where we come from, what we do, where we're going. That all colours our outlook. And so there's, exercises you can do to get out of the way. But if you simply flatly refuse to get out of the way and you believe that X, Y, or Z is what is going to cure if I came into every consultation thinking meditation is going to cure you, and I'm stubborn about that, then that would be ineffective entirely, because it might help. It might help 20% of people, but it's not going to help everybody. Just like if I said everyone has to do Brazilian jiu-jitsu in order to overcome their confidence issues and feel better and therefore have improved mental health. That's not going to work for everybody. It just isn't, right? It's nonsense, right? So we have to be open-minded. And there have been times, I will be very honest with you, there have been times where I just haven't been able to help people. I just haven't. And so it's the GP, it's the professional help, it's the medication, it's the, go and see the psychiatrists. It goes back to that. I like to think that I can, be a purveyor, if you like, of self-care advice most of the time. That's pretty much what I do. And I've just weaponized my capacity to be able to deliver that in a way that is either convincing or in a way that is, helpful to the individual, that helps them contextualize it and things like this. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a psychotherapist. I've got health qualifications and I've got a lot of experience. But when it gets beyond, the self-help, the standard professional help advice, and it really, really is like specialist professionals who have been training for many, many years that take over, psychotherapists and, some of these really, really qualified, experienced counselors and therapists that have been doing it for many, many years. Like, I'm qualified a little bit and by experience, but I definitely didn't do like 7, 8, 9 years of study like a lot of these, psychiatrists have done. Are you with me?
Do you think it's a tricky area when you've got because we live in the UK, so we have the National Health Service. You've got the kind of public counsellors and therapists that are obviously tied to the NHS, and they're part of that system. But then you've got the private ones who are obviously self-funded, and they make their money directly from their clients. Do you see that as a kind of a tricky area for things like therapy, that there could be vested interests occasionally?
Well, I really do. I really do, when there isn't a reliable way of registering them, as long as these names are unprotected. I mean, it boggles my mind that counsellor and psychotherapist are not I'm speechless. I'm in an R-ing because I can't find the right words. I don't get how that can possibly enable us to have a consistently reliable service. And obviously you could come back and say that no service is consistently reliable. And that's fair. But it definitely reduces the chances significantly of encountering a cowboy if you have to do X number of years of training in order to use the term counsellor, or it is it's a crime, or it's, there's some way of enforcing that on people for not using it. I have to be so careful. For some reason, people always think I'm a doctor. I've got to correct them every time because I have to be so careful. And anytime I'm doing business stuff and people, want to market me or, bring me in, why are you a mental health consultant? No, I can't use that. I can't, because mental health consultant makes you think that you're not only a doctor, but a consultant doctor. So you're like the top of the tree. And when it comes to doctors, and I'm just clearly not that, I'm just not that, right? So
we had that very same issue when we were trying to come up with your title for the podcast.
I know. And I think it's for good reason, Tom. I really do think it's for good reason, because I can't imagine the amount of trouble that I would get into, but also the amount of trouble I could cause for other people if they somehow, just believe that I'm something that I'm not. Yeah, it's really important to me like get it right and be authentic. And I know that, I know that took a long time, but it was important to get it right.
I mean, I think it's great, and I think it is, like you say, authenticity, and it shows that you're really serious about what you are and what you do. I think that you want to be so serious about your title and get it right to make sure that you're not mis-selling and misrepresenting to people, because at the end of the day, you're dealing with another human being and their mental health, or if you're in occupational health, it could be other things as well, like even their physical health, but you're dealing with another person.
Or even their employment, right?
Yeah.
There's so much of that.
Things.
Yeah, it is. And one of the things people always ask me is like about my work is like, I could never do that. It must be so hard. I'm like, yeah, it's hard. And so I try and make it a little bit easier by managing everyone's expectations about precisely what it is that I can and can't do, with having very clear sort of boundaries in what I call myself and how I term myself. It's because I do think there's a lot of people out there that are doing, there's a lot of people with lived experience talking about mental health. And that's good, right? Because the more we talk about it, the less alien it becomes and the more we become accustomed to it. But when it strays into being a consultant or being, a keynote speaker, that sort of stuff in your email signature is one thing. But when you start giving out advice based on personal experience, I think there's always a bit of personal experience that informs advice, but I also think there needs to be a bit of an academic element to it as well, a little bit of experiential and academic understanding about the dynamics of the circumstances you're talking about, which is why I hope people don't think it's a cop-out when we're talking about, physical health in the construction industry. And I'm saying I've got to recognize the barriers of my capacity to speak with authority, because I never worked there and I don't really know many people that have, and there's been a knowledge share. It's a big field, just not one I've been exposed to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you gave an alternate example as well based on something that you did you had experience with. So you're treating it professionally.
I try to.
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes perfect sense to me, Chris, and everything you've said, like, I agree with. And obviously, you're just trying to put yourself across as a professional, as we've said, and you're one of those who is obviously not a cowboy and is very focused on making sure they get across properly, that they use the proper terms for their qualifications. I mean, that's what everyone should be doing. And I think if we're just going to conclude now very quickly, going back to the Guardian article that started off our massive chat about this, that's what a lot of the people in that weren't doing. And it kind of just proved how easy it is for people to get into that field and just have absolutely zero qualifications and kind of take people on just a joyride, really, and take money out of their pocket, which is really sad. And there was also stuff in there as well about just patients and therapists not gelling, which is another thing you talked about. And obviously that's a really difficult situation. I don't really know what the answer is for that 100%.
Do you want me to give you the answer? Yes, it's terminate it immediately. If you don't think you can work through it, if you're not gelling, terminate it immediately. There is no need for you to worry about the other person's feelings. They should, if they're legit, they should already be in a sort of professional engagement with another counsellor. It's part of being registered on some of the registers that you have to be engaged in, support yourself, and you have to have sources of, they should be robust enough to accept the fact that not, they can't help every single person. So terminate it immediately. You have no obligation really towards how that other person feels, either way. Like I told you, man, the door's there. You can go anytime you like. I'm not attached to this whole process. So terminate it immediately. Find someone else. Hopefully you'll gel with them.
We're about to conclude, and now you've just thrown something in there, haven't you? Why did you do that? Because now I'm going to have to ask.
Go on.
Whose job is it to terminate it? The patient or the therapist?
Good question. Have I ever terminated? I don't think I have, because I think if you still want to, take my time, that's absolutely fine. You come and talk to me. But if you feel like there's no, I would say it's the patient's job. Ultimately, the patient is trying to get well.
As a qualified professional, if you can see that it's not working, should you step in and tell the patient, I don't think this is working?
Yeah, well, you could do. You could take that point of view. Like I said, I've never terminated on anybody, but I've also, I also try and have a consultation with the individual about whether it's working or not, and whether it's worth continuing with, and whether let them make the decision. I never make the decision for them. It's a conversation ultimately. And, I wonder if I've left people feeling if I'm like, the bluntest person. The door's there, but that's a metaphor, I suppose.
He didn't say it like that.
No.
Like, he didn't say it like that.
Nah. So to answer your question, I do think it's if the person themselves is not feeling it as being beneficial, then they should try somebody else. I do believe that. However, I do agree as well that it's incumbent on a clinician to have a check-in of some sort. How do you think today has gone? Have I been helpful to you? And if not, why not? How can I help you? Or is it just not, I'm not the one? Like, is there someone else? Find somebody else in the practice, outside. There are opportunities. Yes.
All right. I don't have anything to add to that, because I think
Cool.
that was perfect. Very spot on. And I agree. Yeah, so that's it. That was in depth. So I hope anyone who's listening, I hope we've answered that fully, because I think that was quite a tricky topic. There was a lot to get in, and you could keep talking about it. But I feel like we've addressed the key things, and it was a really good discussion. But obviously, we do have to conclude at some point. We don't want this to go into Joe Rogan territory where it's like 4 hours long, although we probably easily could.
Yeah.
But we'll conclude now, and I'll just say to everyone, thank you very much for listening or watching. If you watch us through the medium of YouTube, as always, we're on all the major podcast platforms, including Spotify and Apple podcasts. So you can find us on them, the two big ones. We hope you enjoyed listening or watching this as much as we enjoy making them, because we enjoy making them a lot. And obviously, we encourage you to like and or subscribe on our social channels. So we're on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. And of course, any questions you have, please send them in to our inbox at askmindgamesuk@gmail.com. That is askmindgamesuk@gmail.com. Obviously, you can send any questions you have to our social channels as well. Please direct message us on Instagram, drop into our DMs, as they call it, the young kids. Same with Twitter with the messaging. Just really trying to promote sending questions.
Isn't Twitter where people DM? Or no, the people DM on Instagram as well.
You can DM on Twitter as well.
Yeah, you can DM on Twitter. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's DMs everywhere now, dropping into all the DMs. But yeah, we're really trying to encourage questions. Send us questions, people. We love answering questions, and we usually manage to get one for each episode, but we're going on a massive questions kind of drive now, because we love the questions. So please send questions.
Yes. Send questions. Please send questions.
Yeah, you've got a qualified professional right here who's more than happy to answer all of your questions, no matter how difficult. We'll always do our best.
Make it as hard as you can. Some of the questions that I've had in person before during mental health first aid training are really good. Like, are Donald Trump supporters mentally unwell? Are conspiracy theorists mentally unwell? Do you have to be, stuff like that. Do you have to be mentally unwell to believe that you saw aliens? Stuff like that is great. I love things like that. In fact, all those three, they came from one person. And they were just like, finally, I've got the guy that's going to ask all these questions. And he just kept firing them at me. And I was like, I really like you. You're good. Like, keep them coming.
We can always answer them as well, Chris, I'm sure. I think the first one has already kind of happened, though. So, are Donald Trump supporters mentally unwell? I mean, they did try and storm the Capitol building, but there's a lot in play with that, But that's politics.
Yeah, it is.
So, thank you, everyone, and we will see you again on the next one very soon.